Well, welcome back. Okay, today is Matthew 19 through 22. All right, and then I'm going to do 23 through 25 as one thing, and there's a lot in there. And then the last three, 26 through 28, is the Holy Week events again. So I've broken it up into those sections. So here we go. And I keep thinking there was something else I thought of that I was gonna say about the earlier readings, something that came up, and I can't think of it now. So if I come with something in the middle, it's because I don't want to forget it. Okay, so chapter 19, verse 1. Now it came to pass, when Jesus had finished these sayings, that he departed from Galilee and came to the region of Judea beyond the Jordan. And great multitudes followed him, and he healed them there. The Pharisees also came to him, testing him, and saying to him, Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for just any reason? And he answered and said to them, Have you not read what he who made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh? So then, they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate. They said to him, Why then did Moses command to give a certificate of divorce and to put her away? He said to them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, permitted you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and marries another, commits adultery, and whoever marries her who was divorced commits adultery. His disciples said to him, If such is the case of the man with his wife, it is better not to marry. Okay, so now let me get all these little footnotes here. The first one is verse 4. Oh, okay. This one, it has created instead of made, so fine. I mean, that's what it means. Okay, and then B is the reference here at the end of that. Genesis 1:27 and Genesis 5:2. All right. And then verse 5 has one at the end too. Genesis 2, verse 24. So those are just the references he's referring to in the Old Testament. So, all right, and then here, that's 5. Okay, wait. And then there's one more over here, 19, verse 9. Yeah, sexual immorality. And here it says, or fornication, because that was technically adultery. Okay, so I'll go over this. But anyway, so the thing that's funny is, I mean, both of these things are in the Bible. God made male and female, okay, and then they come together, they get married and become one flesh. And that happens more than just physically. I mean, they fall in love and become as one. So, it's like one being in a way. And then, of course, physically they come together. So they unite, in many ways. So that's what that means. And that's in there, all this, coming together. And shall not leave, he'll leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. I mean, these are all references that are in the Bible, in the Old Testament. And then the thing with Moses was also in there. Okay, so it's kind of funny that the Pharisees come up and question him, I mean, it's in the Bible, then they're technically questioning God the Father in a way, because they don't know, but anyway. But like, that's kind of funny. Like, why is that? Like, as if they're trying to catch him in a contradiction. But ironically, I mean, he is the author. So, okay. I mean, whatever. But then, okay, so we have these two things in there. And then, I mean, they are technically asking about this because to them it looks like a contradiction. Although they're trying to trap him, which, as I said, doesn't make any sense, but ironically, But I mean, it looks, just to get to that point, it looks to them like a contradiction, but it's not a contradiction. And this is the case with a lot of things in the Old Testament, okay? All right, like there's the ideal plan, right? The ideal goal and the will of God, like, okay, man, woman, they meet, they fall in love, they want to get married, and then they do, let's say, and they become one flesh, and everything is beautiful and roses and wonderful, and no trouble in paradise, right? Just wonderful. I mean, that is God's will for that. But in creation, problems happened in the Garden of Eden, all that. So it's not going to be all roses sometimes, many times. So this is why there are concessions, all right? Like sometimes you read things in the Old Testament and people think it's condoning a certain thing, and it's technically not. It's just like a concession, like, okay, we know you're going to do this. It's better that you do this than that. It's better, that they, like when a man has more than one wife, okay, that kind of thing. It wasn't God's original plan. It just came along and it was allowed, like that kind of thing. And then you have cases of like that famous King Henry VIII, he had 8 wives or something, and was not satisfied in each case and has each one executed till he finds one he's happy with or something. Like, and then, yeah, and I forgot where this whole thing came up with divorce. There was something with divorce. So they split from the Catholic Church and became the Church of England. I mean, it's all the same thing, but okay, so that one has divorce, whatever. But, it is, in this case, like, yeah, it's better to just separate and divorce than kill each other. So, I mean, it's a concession, okay? Like, he knew the evil hearts of men, and it's better like this than that kind of thing. And that comes up a lot in the Old Testament. When we go through that, I'll go over that stuff, but that's all it is. So it's not like, yes, this was the ideal plan of God for a man to have 10 wives. No, not at all. And this was the thing with the divorce. Like, it's better that that's allowed than that somebody gets hurt, That's why it was in there. And he just explains that, like, that's it, So anyway, so let me just read that again. And I did a whole video on marriage and remarriage and divorce and all those things. So there's a video on that where I go in great detail. If you're interested, you can look for that one on the channel. But for now, I wouldn't review everything. I'm just going to reread this here. And the way they ask this, like, can't we just divorce a woman for any reason, and not really needing a reason, really is, what they want. So it just misses the whole point of the heart of God and marriage. Okay, and he answered and said to them, have you not read that he who made or created them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore what God has joined together, let not man separate. They said to him, Why then did Moses command to give a certificate of divorce and to put her away? Before I go on, notice this is all in one direction. This is all the man divorcing the wife, putting her away, divorcing her, right? Nothing is mentioned of the other way, her divorcing him, and that kind of thing, because that time back then it was really all very one-sided. Okay, all right. He said to them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, permitted you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. Like this wasn't, the heart of God. It's just an allowance because of the hardness of their hearts. So that's it. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife, so like even if you do it, this is the case, divorces his wife except for sexual immorality. I'll come back to that. And marries another commits adultery, and whoever marries her who is divorced commits adultery. So like, again, it goes back to the perfect will ideal thing. In that case, yeah, but life is very imperfect from the fall and things get very messy. But here, like he's saying, if a man just divorces his wife because he's tired of her, and let's say finds a younger woman and takes off and marries her, he commits adultery against the first wife. Okay? And, and then either way, like that original vow was broken, so it would be adultery, but it's not her fault that he took off. Okay? I don't think she should have to suffer for that. And if she remarries, it's adultery, but like it's not a perfect world, and these are the things that come in. So anyway, and then here, so except for sexual immorality. So this is if she cheated on him and commits adultery, that's what that is, then like he's authorized, justified to divorce her and remarry, and it's not adultery because she already broke that and committed adultery. That's what it says, So there are cases where it's okay to get a divorce, and if you remarry, it's not adultery. That's what this says, except for sexual immorality or fornication, which is, in this case, it's adultery, because she was married to him and she's cheating on him. So, and it works the other way around too, wife towards the husband. If he does that, she's okay to divorce him. So that's it, but, so, yeah. So there are exceptions, okay? And there are false teachers out there who will tell you every divorce is sin and you're going to go to hell and all this kind of thing. And it's like, no, there are exceptions. And even then, I mean, it's not like, okay, that's going to send you there. I mean, these people might not even be Christians at the time anyway, but all right. So anyway, but it is something to take seriously. I mean, the spouse is not meant to be disposable because, the husband is tired of the wife. She's not young anymore and all that. And she had a lot of kids now and that kind of thing, and she's not attractive to him anymore. Okay, those are not justified reasons to get a divorce and chase after a younger woman just because it's, to his liking. Okay, that's not justified, and that's a sin for sure. Whether he remarries somebody or not, just divorcing her already is a sin then. Again, unless she did something here, she committed adultery, then okay, then he's exempt from that as being a sin. And likewise in the other direction, of course, So, yeah. So that's that. And it's interesting too in the culture that back then everything really was very one-sided, and Jesus was very revolutionary in standing up for women. And this whole thing is the rights of women. Like the man is committing adultery against her, by leaving her, divorcing her, and marrying somebody else. And back then, that wasn't even a thought in their mind, So that's how revolutionary this was. And today, people don't see that because they don't know the culture back then, there at that time. So I just wanted to point that out, Okay, and then they say this, it's better not to marry, like, wow, how is it going to be that perfect? And we better not even marry or we'll be in trouble because anything can go wrong. And that's so true. Okay, so then we get to that. So 11, but he said to them, all cannot accept this saying, but only those to whom it has been given. Okay, for there are eunuchs who were born thus from their mother's womb, and there are eunuchs who were made eunuchs by men, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. He who is able to accept it, let him accept it. So here, for instance, it's kind of the answer. Like, again, the ideal and reality. In some cases, the ideal is reality, but in some cases, it's not. Like here he says, all cannot accept that. Like, and of course, this goes together when they said, it is, if such is the case of the man with his wife, it is better not to marry. Well, you have to consider it wasn't like today, okay? Marriage and sex went hand in hand. At least most of the time it was supposed to, okay? So in other words, then nobody would be having sex, okay, if they didn't marry. And today it's a very different world, right? But unfortunately, but back then, at least they abided by that. So then that's why celibacy comes up. Well, okay, then they wouldn't be having any sex, and some people can handle celibacy and some people can't. And that also comes up in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 with, where Paul is telling people it's good if you can do that, but not everybody can. And if you're on the other end of the spectrum, and it literally says, if then it's better to get married. It's better rather to marry than to burn with lust. Okay, word for word. It doesn't say you just need to get more spiritual, or you just need to pray about it more, and, for God to give you the strength for that. Well, maybe it could work, but that's not what it says as the solution. The solution was to get married. Like, that's just their physical state, and it's not a sin of the flesh to have a sex drive. Some just have more of one than others, and the solution was to get married. That's it. So, yeah, and I've heard a lot of false teaching in that area, but this is the biblical perspective, just the reality of this. So, and Paul was explaining that he was one of those who could handle that, but not everybody could. He said some have this gift, some have that gift. So, okay, that was acknowledged, that spectrum there, that reality of different levels of sex drive, okay? So as a Christian, it's not okay to just run around, okay, you have to get married. And I know today it's very hard to find the right person, and oh boy, it's a mess. It's a big problem, and definitely, I will not hide from that fact that it's hard. But, okay, again, that's what the thing is, to just try to do. Go out and get married to a person who is like you, a Christian and everything. Okay, so, and there's so much stuff. It's complicated, but I don't want to start on all these rabbit trails here. So, again, it's the same kind of thing. Like, some are able to do that celibacy thing and some are not. So then you're the one that needs to get married if not. And that's okay. There's nothing inferior about that, okay? God just made it that way. So, that's it. Okay. So, but he said to them, all cannot accept this saying, but only those to whom it has been given. So, like, this gift, that gift. 12, for there are eunuchs. Now, a eunuch is one who, from what I know, and I didn't look this up too much, but a eunuch is like, it's a man, not a woman, I guess, right? Because, a man where that part has been removed, but not in the weird way like today, okay? Just in a way of, in general, like they want to be asexual, like, no, I don't want any sex, okay? That kind of thing. So, okay, enough about that. For there are eunuchs who were born thus from their mother's womb. So sometimes that was the case, and it was just a birth defect, okay? And there are eunuchs who were made eunuchs by men, and that can be like in a war situation or something. And there are eunuchs, or whatever, maybe they wanted that, who knows. All right, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. So, like, they chose that. They didn't want to be bothered with a sex life, and they chose that so they wouldn't be bothered by that. So, that's what they did. That's what it says, So, anyway, okay, he who is able to accept it, let him accept it. So, it's not for everyone. This and that, there are different things going on, and that's okay. And that's it. Okay, next. 13. Then little children were brought to him that he might put his hands on them and pray, but the disciples rebuked them. But Jesus said, let the little children come to me, and do not forbid them, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. And he laid his hands on them and departed from there. Okay, so here we see, again, the emphasis on children, a childlikeness, and even this, for such is the kingdom of heaven. So again, I know I said this before, but if anybody has a child who died at any young age, or a miscarriage, that kind of thing, just the baby, their soul goes to heaven, and that's it. So you can just take comfort in that this child is in heaven, okay? And I want you to get there too, so you can see this child or children that you've had. So, yeah. And then some people really worried it because by false teaching, they think that their baby didn't get baptized in time before it died, and then they think it didn't get to heaven. That's the damage that false doctrine will do. Okay, it has nothing to do with that. Water baptism doesn't save you at any age. And baptism without believing doesn't even do anything. It's in vain. It's null and void anyway. It doesn't do anything for you either way anyway. So there's that. Then the baby, it's not their fault, of course, and they don't know what's going on either way. And on top of all that, he says, the kingdom of heaven is made up of such as these. How are they not going to go there when they die? I mean, they're innocent. Of course they're not going to go down the other way. I mean, that should be so obvious. Anyway, so don't worry about that issue about baptizing babies, okay? And I've talked about baptism before, water baptism, so all the baptisms. So I won't launch into that again here, but I just want to say that. Don't worry. That's it. Okay. 16. Now behold, one came and said to him, good teacher, what good thing shall I do that I may inherit eternal life? All right. Now, so he said to him, why do you call me good? No one is good but one, that is God. But if you want to enter into life, keep the commandments. Okay, so, I mean, he was good because he is God, but anyway, he's kind of making a point to him. And then he says this at the time, okay? So that was what they were doing at the time. They were still under the law, all right? So he said to him, which ones? All right, so Jesus said, and he quotes, the basic ones here: you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness. Okay, I'll get to that. Honor your father and your mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The young man said to him, all these things I have kept from my youth. What do I still lack? Okay, so now that is interesting because he sensed that he still lacked something, because just keeping the law alone will not do it. Okay, and he even said he did that, all right, and that won't get you there. So, and then he answers him, but let me just go back to this thing about, a lot of people will claim that one of the 10 Commandments is lying, but it really is this: you shall not bear false witness. And that's what Jesus is quoting here. There's a major difference because, depending on the lie, I mean, there were times in the Old Testament where, somebody lied and they were blessed by God for doing that. Yeah, I know, what a shock, right? I'll tell you, it was in Exodus 1 and the early chapters where the Pharaoh was having the babies murdered by drowning them in the river. And the midwives were supposed to be there for the childbirth. And he instructed them to kill the babies, okay, right away. And they refused because they obeyed God above man, which is what you're supposed to do. So it's also an example of that. But then, on top of it all, when they came back to him, because he said, well, how come they're not dying? They're all alive. And then they came back to him and they lied. And they said, well, the Hebrew women are more robust and they give birth before we can get there. So, like, in other words, they don't have an opportunity to do that. But it was a total lie. They just refused to murder. And that's what you're supposed to do. Always obey God above man and keep moral laws and don't break them, obviously. Like, murder is a big deal. Yeah. So, any of those things. And so then to get around all that, they just lied. They didn't say, well, we're just not going to do it, which would be okay, but they did it that way. I think that way they could save more lives. Otherwise, he might get somebody else in there who will do it, This way they could go around and have all the babies saved. So that was better than that they weren't really upfront about it and just lied about it and said, that thing, that excuse. So yeah, they lied, and guess what? It was good. It was the right thing to do. It depends on the situation, and that's okay. And God even blessed them for it. So nobody can say, oh, that's a sin. Oh, you're going to go to hell because you lied. Forget that they saved somebody's life, right? I mean, that's how rigidly closed-minded some people are, and they don't understand. The point of the law is love, love for humanity. That's the spirit of the law, and even the New Testament says that. So you gotta navigate by that, not, well, it says this right here, so I can't tell a lie, even a white one, so now you're gonna have to die and be killed even though you're perfectly innocent, and put that in a justice scale and see how far you get. I mean, absolutely not. So it depends. Sometimes it's the right thing to do to lie, and sometimes it's not. Okay, people who steal and lie about it, of course it's wrong. And then in that case, lying is a sin. Depends on what it's about. Okay, and that's just the downright reality of it. If somebody wants to pride themselves in being, having a religious spirit and they don't understand, then, oh well, they don't understand, and that's it. They're just wrong. But anyway, there is still the point of that is not the same. Any kind of lie is not the same as bearing false witness. And they try to twist it into that, but that's not what that is. Bearing false witness is much more than that. It's not just a lie. It's a bad lie, but it's a heavy level of sin with bearing false witness. For example, back in the Old Testament, they had that thing about, like, they had a lot of wilderness. And so let's say somebody committed a crime and they had to have two witnesses to claim, yes, I saw him do it, Otherwise, they just didn't have enough testimony to, like, stone the person or something, because it was all a serious thing. So, you had to have that on the word of two witnesses that they were considered guilty, and they could still lie. But that's what I'm saying. Like, if they bear false witness against somebody who's innocent and claim that they're guilty, and then this person's put to death for something they didn't do, and they claim they committed a crime they didn't, it's a very serious thing. So back in those days, that would be murder. But we have lower levels of this, and we see it today. It could be in the workplace. They might bear false witness against a person that they did something corrupt at work, and they didn't. And then that might get them in trouble, and, based on the testimony of these people that claim they're witnesses to that. So they're bearing false witness. So it's just basically, claiming an innocent person did something wrong when they didn't, and that they're guilty when they're not. So, and that can get people into a lot of trouble depending on the levels involved in this, all the way up to somebody going to jail who's innocent, or just losing their job, or ruining their reputation and their business, something, anything, and it's all bad, and that's a very serious sin. So that's a total different thing than simply lying about something, okay, bearing false witness. So I just wanted to get into that and explain it, because this kind of goes on a lot, people falsely accusing you of something that you didn't do wrong, and they know it. That's bearing false witness. Okay, they just want to get some dirt on you and get you in trouble. That's the sin of bearing false witness. And, it can really have serious consequences and ruin a person's life. So it's a terrible sin. Okay, and so that's it. All right, now I think I got that hammered into the wall well. All right, and these are obvious, Okay. Now, so what do I still lack, right? He feels something is missing. Jesus said to him, if you want to be perfect, go, sell what you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. And come, follow me. Okay, so basically follow him. But when you follow him, these are the things you do. You help the poor, you give to charity, and you'll have treasure in heaven for it. So and there are different levels of that. I mean, you can have the extreme, and you can have what you can do, what you're able to do, hopefully something. And he said that to be perfect, like this is perfect. And there was that case I read about in Fox's Book of Martyrs. That's why I read it. That one guy who, he literally did do this. Not that he was the only one, but I just mentioned him, that some guy in the Mediterranean, I forgot where, he really did take everything he had and sold it, and either gave the money to the poor or gave the goods to the poor. Maybe he kept the goods and gave them to the poor, and that kind of thing. So he didn't have anything left. And they suspected because of this that he was a Christian. And they came and arrested him, and he was martyred. Okay, so and it's interesting that some people might question, well, now what's he supposed to live on? Well, he didn't have to worry about that, and that's a good thing. I would rather go that way and be martyred and get my reward in heaven sooner rather than later. That's fine by me, no, not going to complain. If some people don't understand the merit of that, they want to live on this earth till they're 99 and cling to every vase they got at the thrift store, whatever it is, okay, have at it. But I'm not in that camp, okay? That's all I'm saying. Okay. And I've seen these people. They are out there. Oh my goodness, let me tell you. Okay, 23. Then Jesus said to his disciples, I could say a lot of things, but okay, let's go. Jesus said to his disciples, assuredly I say to you that it is hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Oh, I didn't read this last. That's what's missing. Okay, come follow me. But when the young man heard that saying, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. Okay, so like the more you have, the more you have to lose, right? And he stood to lose a lot if he obeyed this, so he went away sad. And there's the choice. Well, which road are you going to take, right? You can't go both ways at once. And so then Jesus said to his disciples, assuredly I say to you that it is hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And again, I say to you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. Okay, so now let's stop. Where does that leave all this prosperity gospel heresy? Right, in the trash can. Exactly. It's all heresy, and it's from the devil, and this is another place that refutes it. One place among many. I did videos on that before too, so okay. But do not desire to be rich, okay? It's not a blessing. It's going to be a hindrance, a trap to keep you out. And the main reason is because it holds on to your heart, and people are bound in bondage to that. Like, here, this guy, he couldn't give it up. What if that choice is that literal and they have to choose between confessing Jesus or giving up all their treasures on earth? And they're holding on to the treasures, they're not going to end up in heaven. Okay, it's that serious. And he said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And you can't serve God and money. You have to pick one. God leads to heaven, the money part leads to hell. It's that literal, okay? Now, I'm not saying you can't have anything, okay? The Bible obviously talks about this in context, but just know this. You cannot have this having your heart. That's the danger. Okay, so do not seek after riches. That's the moral here. And how hard it is for them to enter the kingdom of God. Okay. When his disciples heard it, they were greatly astonished, saying, who then can be saved? See, they looked at it in a worldly way at the time still, But Jesus looked at them and said to them, with men this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. And salvation is only possible with God, not men, of course. So that's what that's saying. Okay. And they used to, like you see this, people have this idea like rich people are more worthy somehow, and like they would get in first in line, and it's the other way around. And he straightened that out. So it's the way of thinking of the world. Okay, 27. Then Peter answered and said to him, See, we have left all and followed you. Therefore, what shall we have? So Jesus said to them, Assuredly I say to you that in the regeneration, this is the next life in this case, when the Son of Man sits on the throne of his glory, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or wife or children or lands for my name's sake shall receive 100-fold and inherit eternal life. But many who are first will be last, and the last first. That's interesting. Okay, so here, coming back to this, like this thing with the 12 thrones, that's why in Revelation, I really think that 12 of those 24 are these 12 apostles. Okay, and then during the millennium, that's what happens. They judge the 12 tribes of Israel who are actually there at the time. Okay, that gets more interesting, but I'll save that for another day. Okay, now here, and everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or wife or children or lands. Now, people think, what? We have to leave them? Well, it's not that, it's not that you are leaving them. Okay, that I would say, no, that's not what this is saying. This is when they give you the ultimatum, when they say, like parents who say, if you're going to follow Jesus, then you can get out of here, And we see that in many parts of the world today, okay, in the Middle East and other places. It comes down to that fork in the road, okay? And they, many choose Jesus anyway. So you're leaving them, but they technically already left you. They're the one forcing you to choose and giving you that ultimatum. And of course, you have to pick Jesus, so you automatically, they're out, these people. So that's it. That's really what that is, okay? So, if you're just out serving God, doing missionary work or whatever, and you have family and they're anywhere else, like they could be Christians or they could be somewhere else on the spectrum, but they're not shutting you out. There's no reason for you to shut them out. So that's not the meaning of that, okay? Now, lands, the same thing. Like they will confiscate stuff from you in some countries. This was even happening back then over there with the early church in Israel. So Hebrews talks about that. They had property confiscated from them, okay? They don't deny Jesus. So, see, for my name's sake, that's why. If this happens, they shall receive, these people, shall receive 100-fold and inherit eternal life. So they'll have the eternal life, but they even get rewarded 100-fold for that. That's where our rewards come, this kind of thing, okay? So 30, but many who are first will be last, and the last first. So that principle again, Okay, now let's see, we're at 43 minutes. So, okay, I'll do a new video for chapter 20, and I'll be right back.